Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brand, joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes, on the heels of United's 1-1 draw with Arsenal. Highly respectable 1-1 draw. Decent second half performance, better than the first. That's, of course, just after the 1-1 draw away to Sociedad, which in itself isn't either a disgraceful result either, or and wasn't a dreadful performance either. So it's very possible United could go through in that game at home. And we will also talk about some of the other positives from yesterday. I thought very composed performance from young Aidan Heaven, and of course we'll talk about the protests that were thankfully well attended, well organized, and given an exceptional message, James, it needs to be amplified about their concerns about how they're running the club. I will give Ruben Amorim some credit in saying that endorsing the fans' right to protest and how important it was for their voice to be heard. I can't imagine that went down too well with his bosses, but I give him credit for that nonetheless. Anyway, Jamesy, how you doing, mate?
Pretty good. Yeah, doing pretty well today. And you?
All good, mate. All good. When we recorded this podcast last week, I was thinking, where are we going to be at next week? Will we be talking about two draws, two defeats, what have you? Strangely enough, with Sociedad, I think United are suited to the slower pace in a way. And I wasn't as concerned about that as I was about Arsenal. But what I will say about Arsenal, even Arsenal at their peak, James, never carried the same level of threat or aura that Liverpool or City did, where I just
Yeah.
absolutely dreaded playing Liverpool or City because you just knew United that's all it's going to take here is just a couple of things to go wrong for it to be a disaster. I never felt Arsenal had that killer instinct ever. And in a game that United maybe should have won second half.
Yeah, and I think you could say the same about Sociedad as well, that United probably should have won.
Yep.
Once again you had I don't know how this keeps happening in Europa League just to bring it up, but these handball calls against United, these
Very
penalties,
harsh.
they're so rough because they're so inconsequential to the game. There's no effect on the game of a call like that. Um, and United were probably the better team. I think Sociedad, that was their first shot on target, the penalty they scored the whole game at the 70th minute. United probably could have got another goal or two as well. But all things considered, a slower pace, it suited them. It did well, and I think that it you'd feel pretty decent about their chances, on Thursday, given that Ugarte should be back as well. But it kind of carried into Arsenal a little bit because against Arsenal, they played deeper, planned to have a bit less of the ball in a way that Ruben Amorim has said before does suit more of the players that are currently in the team than, trying to play on the front foot so
Mm.
much, trying to be so aggressive. He's talked about that a deeper line settled in. They're very hard to beat when they do that. They actually kind of showed that they're very, very hard to beat. They defend really well. Arsenal had, I think, 2 shots on target in the whole first half, very few in the second half. They did really well with it. In the second half, I think you could start to see with the goal that Bruno scored from a free kick, which was excellent. Maybe a little poor by David Rea, but certainly he saved their ass quite a bit later in the game to make up for that if he'd made a mistake. Um, they definitely had some confidence. There were some things I think you could see that with the space United had in that game, because they were playing a bit deeper, it was easier to execute a lot of the things they probably want to execute in other games. Mazraoui had I think a really great game, playing really high, almost as an attacker for most of the game, like you would really want out of this system.
Mm.
If it's working like it's supposed to. One of the best, I think, probably the clearest chance of the game was Dallo getting forward, uh, deep in there, hitting a cross over to Mazraoui, running into the box, wing back to wing back. Mazraoui had a good first time shot, a good save by David Rea, and one that was probably the most clear chance of the game. So there was some good things working, and I think that certainly United are still a team that when they have a little more time in space to run with the ball, when they have a little more room to operate, you can see that they can be pretty good when they start getting that feeling. But it's always tougher when there's less space, when there's less time, when there's less everything. But the good news is it's a good result. It was a good performance, and it was two good performances back to back, I think, which we haven't seen in quite a while. Things that give you some hope, and with Europa League being really the only remaining meaningful competition United are in, you kind of take that performance and think, you don't downplay it much, because this is kind of the level of team that is in Europa. If United can do that, they have a shot at it. I mean, Tottenham lost to AZ Alkmaar the same day. So, and that's one of the better teams in the competition as well. So, yeah, all in all, I feel pretty positive about it, that maybe there's something that can be salvaged from the season. I mean, getting Champions League somehow out of this year would be like, it would be massive on a number of levels. We know the
Well,
financial
Champions League
issue,
here from
but
this
it's like
position is,
insane.
Champions League from this position is unthinkable, and
Yeah.
it would be such an enormous positive and boost for United if something like that could actually happen, because it would completely change how they speculate for next season, and it would redefine the season. That is an achievable goal to me when I look at that Europa
Yeah.
League, and that's not being snobby. I'm looking at that saying that is a very achievable goal. But what is then? Then what happens to United, James, is one, people's salaries go back up 20%,
Yep.
right? 20,
They
20
can
so
afford that. They can afford
23.
that with Champions.
Two, there now becomes a responsibility on the football club to provide a team that can actually compete in that
Yes, they can
competition, so they
stay
don't get
there, right?
embarrassed.
Yeah.
Because United haven't been competitive in the Champions League for quite a while.
Mhm.
I mean, I think you have to go back to probably Solskjaer when Ronaldo was there,
Yeah.
when they beat Villarreal and outside the group stages. But truthfully, most of the time United have been shocking. And I'm not even sure I'm recalling that right, but I think they knocked the when
Well,
Ronaldo
the
scored in the last
season
minute, they were through, right?
Solskjaer got sacked, we
Then obviously
played
PSG
under
win.
Rangnick against Atletico later on, and did we get through that and lose, or did we lose in the second leg?
Yeah,
I
I
can't
remember.
remember, but it was tough. No,
Memory
I
at
mean,
the thing you get to see it.
yeah, Ollie's interim run was probably the best run that they've had in the Champions League, because we've been grouped, the season after, and so yeah,
But
it's been a long time since we've been competitive.
as you quite rightly say, James, look, the reality is that you need to have a lot of injuries. And
Yes.
for some reason, that's always a major mitigating factor when discussing anyone else's current predicament, but it never is
Yeah.
with United. I think it gets mentioned 16 times a press conference with Ange Postecoglou, and to me, rightly so. I think it's 9 asterisks and one's explaining City's current form when we discuss Rodri and other injuries. And it just is, talking about Arsenal yesterday with injuries and going, um,
Hello. I looked
well,
at
is
the
he really
list.
relevant in this or
They've
what?
got they've got 3, right? And they're
Yeah.
they're significant, and then you go to United's and it's like
But,
it
but
goes off the page.
and the other part that I don't understand is, okay, so City of injuries. Well, why aren't they pulling the need and having work? Why aren't they going to
Mhm,
the academy instead of being spending
mhm,
250 million? By the way, it's never even mentioned that they're on the verge of falling outside the top four. I mean, there is a scandalous double standard with that. The positive
yeah,
is for United, whether this has been United's predicament in the past, where they've had catastrophe at the football club. Other catastrophes at the football club were not of our own making. This one, unfortunately, is. That's resulted in having to look to the academy for solutions. One of the outstanding positives yesterday was the performance of young Aidan Heaven. And I know that there's certain things that are performative and gimmicky, but sometimes they're just an authentic, spontaneous response from a young kid. But when he
yep.
was trying to G up a crowd yesterday, and I seen Chido Obi do that as well, and I'm looking at these kids and going, that youthful energy, they want to compete. They
Mhm,
haven't been contaminated yet by all the
yeah,
other nonsense. And there's just something very genuine about that young, youthful exuberance that it starts to get spoiled a bit later, and then you sort of develop the Garnacho sort of element to it,
yeah,
right? But it's not. But that happens a lot with young players. It's not
yeah.
unusual. But young Aiden having yesterday, magnificent.
He was, and he's, he came on in the FA Cup, and unfortunately, we lost the penalties on that, and he looked calm and composed and all of that as well. But in this game, he looked like he took another little step forward in the performance. It was great. He really didn't put a foot wrong in it. He showed qualities and toughness. Defensively was good. One of the things I have to really credit him for that, and it kind of frustrates me with United's team, and I know it's a big focus in recruitment um, coming into the summer, is it was so interesting to see Aiden Heaven. He would get forward and sometimes pick up the ball, and instead of stopping and just looking for a pass, he would move and keep moving with the ball and go to change directions and kind of run with it and move the defense around and then lay the ball off. And
Mhm.
it's such a simple thing, but there's so many United players that don't do it. That the second they get the ball, it's like they think, I have to pass. I can't run with the ball. They don't have that skill set. And it's a really a missing ingredient. And it's quite interesting to see a young player come in and be able to do that right away. Um, I think it's probably one of the most standout qualities that he has and that United have been missing is just that the calmness, step on the ball, move it around, manipulate the defense a little bit and not just stand there and and wait for the defense to move and then hit a pass or something like that. So there was a lot of good things with that, and I take positives with it. And given that United will probably have to be in the market for a fair few young players as a part of their plan, it is one of the positives you can take is hopefully to get a bit more of that hunger, drive, the motivation, the urgency, and maybe tip the scales a little bit on what we know has been a fairly difficult atmosphere. And maybe the idea is you can get enough guys like that to that it doesn't get contaminated, but rather it shifts the scales a little
For
bit.
that to be maintained, James, that's going to come from a top.
For
It's all
sure,
going to
for
be about
sure.
how today nourish that atmosphere, or
Yep.
what is it that they want.
Yep.
I would love to ask any of us, what is it that you want these players to think of you?
Yeah.
And then work towards that, and vice versa. To
Yep.
the players, what do and to me, like, we've talked about this before, and I don't want to, beat the dead horse, but we all know that there's a lot of work to be done
Yep.
internally before to
Sure.
start developing that environment. And it's the antidote to doom and gloom, James, is exciting young players.
Yes. Yep.
When you see exciting young players come into your first team, it's the same way as saying, and it's just about hope. It's about hope that there's
Yeah.
someone else out there that can come in and solve a problem. And plus, young players graduating from the academy into the first team is one of the few areas of sport left that still has romance. That
Yes.
still has, where there's still some meritocracy left, where it's still a dream. And every young footballer that kicked the ball dreamed of doing exactly that. So that's the encouraging aspect of it, that maybe we'll see one or two other of these young players who are on the cusp getting some game time before the end of the season,
Yep.
possibly making themselves. We talked about this with Ten Hag. Even one of the jobs of young players over the summer is for one or two of them to emerge, to force themselves into the
Yes.
first team and into the manager's reckoning. Like Toby Collier has
Yep.
done that a bit.
Yep.
But he's been interrupted by injuries. He's at an age, James, where he really has to, either you start playing regularly or you have to leave. You're 21.
Yep.
You're at an age where there's a lot of players at your age who are well established. Now, this is his
Yep.
tipping point for me. Um, and then there's the situation with Garnacho. And I was thinking about Garnacho, and I'm thinking to myself, what is his primary responsibility in this team? What would you say it is?
I don't know.
Is it to score goals?
Because,
Is it to assist? Is it to
well,
score, be an assist to the striker? Is it, your
I
job's to
think
tip
his
them with
his
the midfield, let
primary
him go through
yeah,
the striker. What do you think?
I think his primary responsibility has been to provide a bit of an outlet for United for the most part, to get them up the pitch, to get them around the goal. Um, You'd say it's scoring goals, and I would say it has been until the last couple of games where I think it's been a clear instruction from flipping him from one side to the other again I would say reduce the amount that he is shooting the ball and more passing, which I think we did see against Arsenal. But he was still kind of the outlet, the player to get up the pitch in the wide, in the not necessarily the wide areas, but in the slightly off-center areas in the half spaces to get United into more dangerous areas as kind of a just that runner that we don't really have. And um, it seems like I would the reason it's hard to answer, I would say, is it seems like it's shifting for me because he hasn't really accomplished, if he was to be the primary goal scorer or a primary goal scorer, he hasn't accomplished that well. And so then it becomes, can you do something different and utilize your skill set to accomplish that?
Yeah, so this is where, to me, Alejandro Garnacho, excuse me, is playing like someone whose primary responsibility is to score goals for Manchester United.
Sure. Hmm.
It doesn't look like to me that someone that's really that interested in squaring a ball
Yep.
or picking up a better pass. If Alejandro Garnacho's in a position where he sees goal, Alejandro Garnacho, no matter how unlikely it is that he's going to score, is going to shoot.
Yep.
Now, here's the thing for me. If I'm Rasmus Højlund, put off that for about a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then eventually I'm going to go and strangle him on the pitch.
Yeah.
No, but I'm serious, Jim.
I
This is what,
understand. I
if you're a
do.
forward
Yes.
and if Alejandro Garnacho and Ruben Amorim is saying to Garnacho, you have as much of a responsibility to score goals as Rasmus Højlund. Okay, then let's judge him on that because they're about the same age, right?
Yep.
And I'm not saying that he should be, by the way. I'm just saying that this is more about Rasmus Højlund to me.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, okay, if it's not, and your primary responsibility is to obviously score goals, but also to support the striker. When I saw Rasmus Højlund get angry at Diogo Dalot, it was okay, but I would be, if I'm a striker, I'm walking around like David Banner.
Yeah.
I'll drop deep for a couple of weeks, but if no one's going to service me, I'm going to lose my head, right? I want you to go back and look at other clips, old United strikers. I can think of numerous times of when balls weren't scored to Van Nistelrooy or Cole and in great teams,
Yep.
and how angry they were, the bollocking you would get in the dressing room. Everyone who's played football, especially who's played with decent strikers, and I was a winger forward, if you aren't scoring that ball to someone who's on 30, 35 goals a season, you are in for it. And by the way, if you're scoring regular goals, you are one of the leaders of the team, shall we say.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So to me, if you've got a striker that is tolerating that level of lack of service, that concerns me. Why are you not furious? Like I would be in the media. I would be making sure that the first thing, because Diogo Dalot said on Thursday, I didn't see him. I don't believe that.
No, me
I
neither.
believe one of two things happened. And neither of them are particularly flattering. One, Dalot just didn't pick the pass out, which is pretty simple, which is a really huge criticism of someone with that. But he's a professional footballer. There's no professional footballer in the world that's not making that pass. I don't know if Dalot wanted to pass him the ball.
Yeah.
And now we've heard this in the media. I don't know if these stories are true about players now, but
Yeah,
it
it was
is
a bit
true that
ago,
when you
but
play with players and you try to and they continuously make mistakes, you will
gonna
start to
lose
make different
confidence in
choices.
them. Yeah.
This is a big for Rasmus Højlund. I would be going absolutely nuts over them not passing the ball to me, and his relationship with Garnacho is weird.
Yeah, it is. They've combined, I think, for one goal since they've been here, a winger and a striker.
That was the one where Garnacho shot in the front of his chest and went in by accident at Luton.
Yeah, and
James,
that is.
Garnacho do this one more time.
Well, look, and I get it because it's difficult.
I know, but I want you to shoot. But there's times when you have to let Ronaldo had to learn this.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I understand. No, I do, but it is and I do get it because it's tough. Like I've looked at the situation and thought, and it's not about leveling like extra abuse on players or things like that, or saying,
No.
somebody,
I think Garnacho can accept so young talent. So I don't want to
but
do
it
that.
is no. But I understand because you get a lot of talk about Rasmus Højlund every week, and I think a fair bit of it is deserved when he's not producing, when he's not. Doesn't necessarily look like he even, like you're saying, like he's even bothered whether he's scoring or not most of the time. That you want him to be more vocal. You have to lead a little bit in that way if you want people to give it to you. And then you look at things like, obviously his confidence is on the floor, but it doesn't help. The situation against Arsenal, receives the ball, takes a heavy extra touch instead of just
Yeah,
shooting.
but
And
what that is, that's exactly what happens when you have no confidence. Everything is
correct.
slower.
No, for sure.
Everything is
But it's
slower.
not going to get
Everything's
it
like being
back.
careful. Yeah, you don't have
It's
the
not going
confidence
to
to
get
hit
it
that ball
back.
first time. It's about don't fuck this up. Sorry,
Yeah.
it's about
Yeah.
making sure everything goes slower. And
Yeah.
I agree with you. Like you just can't go on in perpetuity. Like
Yeah.
you're not just net a trigger. You have. Well, I was, you look at Villa signed out at Asensio.
Mhm.
Asensio scored more goals than Rasmus Højlund already. I mean, James,
Mhm.
come on. This and United couldn't have got Asensio. You couldn't have got
Yeah.
players. This is
It's rough.
farcical. This can't
Yeah.
continue.
But and I look at that and I think, so Rasmus, I think correctly in a sense, has been a focal point because he is not playing well. He should have scored that goal, yesterday. He should have
Mhm.
scored a few when he's had. There are instances like we saw when Cheeto came on that he can make chances for himself that Rasmus is also not doing and all that. But there has been a lot of like, Rasmus is written off, Garnacho is the future type of
Yeah,
type
I'm
of
not into
talk,
that.
and it's not really fair in that respect, because
I
when
think
you
they're
look at
both
it,
exceptional young
it's
players. I do. I
it's
feel for both of them.
yeah,
I do.
and I think their futures and how they're both playing is tied together. Garnacho passed it half the time that he was shooting and actually looked for the pass. I think Rasmus probably has quite a few goals right now, and these things get tied together, and it looks like two individuals all the time playing like they're the only person on the pitch when they play, and that doesn't work, and it's obviously come to light even way more since, of course, Amad Diallo has been injured and has not been on the pitch, because he was probably, he was scoring goals himself but also creating for others and doing things like that, and it's an issue. And the long-term solution for it, I don't know. I don't know where you go with it, because it's
You
hard
know,
to see where they're at, that both could be starting for United next season
do you know
at
what
this
this is
stage.
also a fight over, James?
Yeah.
This is a personality fight.
Mhm.
Then I don't think it's one Haaland can lose. If you're a striker and you're going to accept playing second fiddle to a winger,
Yeah.
Rasmus Højlund will never be judged on assists. Rasmus Højlund
Correct.
will be judged on
Correct.
goals.
Yes.
Garnacho will be partly judged on assists because it's not primarily his. So typically, what happens in a situation like this is that you then get the striker playing against the winger. Going,
Mhm.
okay. And then you compete against yourself. But this is a
Yep.
situation that Marine needs to solve. He
Yep.
needs to define very clearly this is what you're judged on. This is what
Yep.
you're judged on. Now, I'm sure Garnacho has a responsibility to do both, and Hoyland has a responsibility to do both too. He's going to have to get involved much more in United's build-up. He's going to have to be much better in how he, in how he holds balls up and how he distributes. There's no doubt about that. But to me, if I'm a central striker and a winger's constantly refusing to score the ball or pass the ball to me and constantly shooting from difficult angles and hasn't scored since November, we're having words in the dressing room.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And to me, like that's something that when you have proper words that get heard,
Yep.
not people that listen to your words, not hear them, that doesn't happen the following week
Yeah.
because you have accepted and so, but to me it's like this functional, with the way the team works. It just, that is a big problem that
Mhm.
that Ruben Amorim really, and I really like Garnacho. I think he's an excellent young player, and I think Hoyland is too. I just think they're a team that's very hard to shine in. But that is a problem that if you can get them both playing well to their strengths, it has a magnificent opportunity of working, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, it does, and it can, because there are a lot of strengths, and they are quite young. That being said, obviously you've got other players, guys like Joshua Zirkzee at the moment, who's really coming forward. As a player from where things are at, who's also quite young, and obviously scored against Sociedad, um and has become like really integral. I mean, he's played most every minutes that have been available in recent times, and as obviously he got subbed off for a little bit of rest, fortunately, because he played 120 against Fulham and then played the full
Mhm.
game on Thursday, and he'll definitely be playing Thursday. And his responsibility, I think, has become really clear, and he's really owned it in his role and his job within the team, and it's made, I think, United look a lot better than before. Especially with some of the other players missing. But I think everybody's got to also realize on this team, players, that they're not just playing for today. With many of them being
Mhm.
young, you look at what's going on at the club. There's really nobody who's going to be. I wouldn't say there's nobody right now, because there are players who this season are showing why they're here, and that they're going to be here, and that they need to be here. Like Bruno Fernandes example, obviously, who's been just exceptional for a few months now, despite everything going on with United. Just every good thing seems to happen through him and come through him in there. But players who cannot pull it together, they do have a bit of a responsibility at this point. If they don't pull it together, they are playing a bit for the future, on the line on this. Because United's the situation they're in, they're gonna have to be a bit, they're not gonna be holding on to people that they
But are
can't. And
United not playing for their future a bit too, if you know
of
what I mean? Like
course.
the players,
Yeah.
because if Bruno Fernandes is 26, James,
Yep.
Bruno Fernandes has a whole different decision to make this summer, in my opinion. And I
Mhm.
love him to death, but Bruno Fernandes could be playing for any top team
Yep.
in the world.
Yep.
And now you hear things like Kabi Mainu, might want to move abroad and wages and what have you. I believe Kabi will stay, but Kabi,
Mhm.
just like every other United player now, has to ask this question sooner than they
Yep.
used to. Is this the right place for my development?
Right.
This is the question, like we said before, that Ashley Young had to ask himself at Arsenal, that Saul Campbell had to, and you have to ask yourself, is this the best place for my development? Because if it's not, my relationship with this football club and the fans, United will get rid of me, right? They'll
Yeah.
not keep me, and that's what you should expect in professional sports. That's that's the relationship you have with your employer. But um, if we look at what we've seen over the last 15 years, you'd be extreme optimist to say that this is the best place for a young player's
Yeah.
development. So
Yeah.
now United are going to have to be confronted with these questions. Garnacho. Garnacho shouldn't be asking this question at 20. It should be a question should be asking at 23, 24.
Mhm.
See him now with Kabi Mane. These guys are all close friends. I
Mhm.
mean, whatever happens to one, the rest of them look at each other and go, "Well, it's going to happen to me." It's so I don't think United should cave and give Kabi Manu 180. I think that's absurd, right? I
Yeah.
think that we
Yeah,
have to
they've
live
made
in the
those
real.
mistakes
Yeah,
in the past, and then in
yeah. No,
2
I don't think
years
we
you're
should do
asking
that.
for 350 and it goes
Yeah,
crazy like that. Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
don't believe in young players looking at this going, "I'm above this," right?
Yeah.
And I'm not part of the problem, But this is what I mean. Like this is where Ineos are going to have to provide a
Mhm.
football club where football players want to play for, who they
Yep.
want to stay, and not just use them as a stepping stone to develop and move
Yep.
on. Like and this is where United have to define themselves as what do
Yep.
you want, what standard do you want us to hold you to? You tell us, and we will.
Yeah, agreed. And that's the big test with all of this, right? In this whole transition, because there's a lot of things that are tough. There's a lot of things that are rough. There's a lot of things that are understandable, a lot of things that aren't. But at the end of it, that is the real test. When they come into this summer with Amarim, when they come to the end of the season, when they come through all of this, do they put this together, and do you really get a defined look at what United are trying to do in a way that's competent, in a way that's understandable, in a way that has a future, and in a way that provides a healthy environment for everybody. And it doesn't mean every player is going to make it, or it's a failure on their part if every player doesn't make it. Um, but I think it's becoming key. One of the things that does make me a bit more optimistic as the season's gone on, even though it's been a bad season in this respect, is I do think when you look at the players that they've brought in, I do think um, there is a change in them, and I do think as it's gone on, they've looked better and better. I've Delict, there were some questions in the beginning, I think, with him, and I think as the weeks have gone on, and especially in recent weeks, he's just looked better and better. He has an absolutely top mentality. I would say the same about Mazraoui. I say the same about young Lenny Yoro. Aiden Heaven, as we saw, even though he's kind of a fringe first team signing like that. You know, Patrick Dorgu, I think you can see it with him, even though he was unlucky to get the red. And by the way, and not just it's just another point on the referees because Mikel Marino stamps on
I
Garnacho,
know.
I believe,
Hmm.
and it is not even looked at. And it's a
Hmm.
stamp. It's the same
I know.
exact studs to the legs things that we get red cards for every time that they will look for to make sure they get it. That's just ignored by the referees, and that's just unbelievable to me because again, fine if you're not going to call it, fine then then why is Dorgu suspended for 3 games? I remember that happened to Pogba against Arsenal way back when 2018 or something like
Mm.
that. It was a really good game. Player goes to ground. He's reaching for the ball. He ends up stepping on him. Just exactly like that. Gets
Yes.
suspended, and it actually turned a lot of the season after that point, missing Pogba for some big games. And it's just ridiculous. But regardless, we've seen. I think we've seen a really good, strong mentality, but I think they've also, Xerxes as well, coming back and wanting to stay and fight through after having a really rough start. Most every player that has come in has been, I would say, better in a sense than what we've seen in the past from a transfer perspective when we've looked at it. And I think we've seen some really good, effect of mentalities and things like that. So there's some positives to take with that maybe they're kind of getting it right in terms of what they're looking for in players, mentally and all of that, what is needed, the toughness that is needed for United. But, obviously we're going to have to see more of that moving forward.
Yeah. I want to ask you about something. When Nuno played against Arsenal, he chose not to play three centre backs because they only had one striker,
Yeah.
and they didn't have a striker. Sorry, so he didn't see the need to overload the centre part of defence. Um, Yet Ruben Amorim did.
Yep.
Still felt the need to go with a three. If you look at a lot of United's recent goals, James, right? If you look at the goals against Ipswich set pieces, right?
Hmm.
The goal against Arsenal set piece free kick.
Hmm.
Um, the goal against Sociedad was probably poor goalkeeping, I would say. But yeah, I'm looking at this and I'm going, every time United attack, they look like they are really short on numbers. So a goal is always going to come from a corner, a set piece, or a major mistake, or something like that. This is partly where, when I look at how United attack, once they get to the final third, it's really quite crude.
Yep.
Just swing a ball and there's very little interplay, very little passing, and they don't have a mad type that's just going to skip past someone and
Yep.
or force a mistake. And I'm looking at that and I'm going, I understand that United feel a bit more comfortable playing with a low block because, of course, defending's easier than attacking. But
Yeah.
to me, it's a concern with how little, United really threaten from open play. And I don't know if they'll ever really accomplish the numbers with playing three. There has to be times when you don't have to play that way. And I understand Amorim adhering to certain principles, but let me ask you: is how many players on that first team will be a part of Ruben Amorim's strongest team, or still be at the club next season?
In terms of who played against Arsenal.
Yeah, so if we look at that, I would say that United could very well sell Garnacho this summer, right?
Hmm.
If they had their way, they get rid of Casemiro, get rid of Ericsson, right?
Yeah, they'll sign a
Um,
striker over Hoyland
yeah,
most
so
likely.
we're going to
Yeah.
say in its strongest 11,
Maybe
the
three.
midfield,
Bruno.
looks completely different.
Yeah. Yeah.
The centre backs will look different. So more than half of that team won't be there next season. So why not be more practical now with the players that you have considered they're not going to be here next season anyway?
Well, I think it's I mean, some of it is just personnel. I mean, when you look at the bench that was
Sure.
available, there's nobody to play. Ruben Amorim's ideal lineup has essentially what are pseudo wingers at wingback, right? It's not 5 defenders on the pitch at any given time, but 3, and having both of those wingbacks being essentially wingers. With his first, and if you look at his first games when he came in, in the selection. I think you get a better hint of his basic idea before having to adjust to injuries and the problems that always come with joining United and having the best ideas, and then everything gets thrown a wrench. And because in his first game he starts Amad Diallo on the right wing back rather than a defender. He starts him at right wing back, and he gets an assist within 2 minutes, right? On the left side, he starts Diogo Dallo, but we know that they were already lining up buying a left wing back for that side. And Patrick Dorgu has played half of his season as an actual right winger, as an attacker, right? And so I think that to some degree, it's a personnel thing. He is not very flexible when it comes to his formation, and he probably never will be. But I think there's other things like at least in hopes that there's an evolution in it. I think a big miss in recent weeks has been Lisandro Martinez as well, unfortunately, with his injury. Because if you recall, before he got injured, didn't he score 2 goals, or he scored a couple of
Well, he
goals,
scored against Liverpool,
and then Fulham, I think.
and then he
By
was fundamental, and also in a couple of goals like the
Yeah,
City away and
because
all
he
that
was,
there. And
even as a defender, he was, grasping, like, get up the pitch,
I was
attack, get in the final third, win the ball, do something with it. And I think that was making a big difference. So, I hope that it improves, I guess, in that respect when it comes to some of the time and the personnel and the things. I look at it and I think, is there any other center backs in the club right now who have the on-ball qualities that Lisandro has to actually you would trust to get up the pitch and get into the attack? I don't think so, right?
No, because Sandro was almost playing in that defensive midfield role where he was stepping
Yeah,
out at centre back, and he was brilliant at you look at a mad goal away to City, which
yes,
come from Lisandro Martinez clipping balls from deep. He's very, very good at that, and
yeah,
was key in a couple of important goals, I think, against Leicester, if I remember.
yep,
When Maguire scored, I think there was, if I'm remembering that
yeah,
correctly, but no, he was very, very good coming from deep. With obviously long balls, especially with United, who can't play in the final third, very
yep.
difficult. Now you're having to see Bruno Fernandes drop deep for that ball playing midfield
Yeah, and
role
that
because
takes from the attack too, that he has
yeah,
to
but
come
it's
back
because
there.
United can't on
Correct.
getting bases in the final third, so it's going to
Yes.
have to come from deep. And of course, it's yeah, it's definitely something. When you listen to Amarim talk about this, they're just not good enough to dominate possession yet.
Correct. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think they're fit enough to dominate possession yet, and I don't think technically they're good enough, and I don't think they have the chemistry or the confidence that's
Just
going
in
to take a
final
lot of work.
answer to that, yeah, I think that Amram, more so probably than a couple of the coaches we have, they really do have to get the transfers right, because I think his system will look way too defensive if they don't get the right players in certain positions. I think it's going to be, it can be, or has potential to look really frustrating in that respect. I think they're going to need something specific more than they may have needed with other systems or other
Yes.
managers, for
The
sure.
next stage in the development of the system cannot be a bunch of games where you grind out a 1-0 win.
Correct, correct. It needs to be
Otherwise,
attack.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
there's, even if you get to a point where you win every week 1-0, who wants to watch that? So the
no,
next stage in development has to offer something that's promising in
yep,
this, where United fans feel that confidence and patience is justified.
yep,
Before we go on to talk about protests, and I want to talk about Matata, of course. Matata linked with United last week. I was thinking, this poor guy gets 370 billion stitches in his head, wakes up, and he's being pursued by Man United. Jesus,
which is worse.
what
Which is
happened there?
worse.
Did I go to hell that fast? No, but I don't know whether this is lazy links, because he played really well against United, and he's
Mm,
obviously a big, strong target man that United lack. Um, I can't say I was that, familiar with Mateta's game on a perspicacious level, shall we say, before before these links come up. I mean, obviously, I watch him playing
yeah,
for
yeah.
Palace, but I don't watch Palace every week. I watch the highlights, so that people will be know more about him than me. But what did you make of those rumors?
It's kind of an odd one to me. Like, it is a bit odd because it falls. almost in a space that I think Ineos want to avoid, that they've made kind of pretty clear. I should probably stop saying Ineos now because it's, it is Vival and Wilcox and Omar who've been hired and appointed, and they're United employees, and they're setting the course on this. But you kind of looked at,
But
like, you've
they
got.
get offered the specific sporting controls, so that's when it
Correct,
comes to
correct.
the
No, no,
finances. I don't like the confusion. But sorry, mate,
yeah.
go ahead on the sporting
No, no,
side.
no. It's all good. It's just I don't think it's like it's not Sir Jim obviously saying, "Hey, I want to sign Mateta" or something like that, right? It's at least I hope not. I'd be pretty
No, but it's the people he
annoyed by
put in
that.
place saying that.
Correct, correct. They're hired. They're there. It kind of doesn't fit their strategy in a sense, right? Because we've listened and heard, like, they want young players in, they want to build for the future, they want to build for the long term, they want to get, they want to have players who will be here when you're challenging in 2028 or whenever it is, right? You want to sign players now who are part of that. Well, Mateta's 28. He'll be 31, 32 by the time they're supposedly going to be challenging for the league. Now, that's not that old for a striker. He could be second. He could be a backup by that point in time. It wouldn't be a big deal. But what throws me a little bit is you have Cheeto who's coming through. You still have a young player in Rasmus Højlund there. He's not a bad player to kind of maybe level things while you're building around. But what do you do in a year? Then what happens? Are you going to buy another top striker, and then you've got, it feels off to me as a signing, like I don't another stopgap, one that you regret in a year, and say, even if it's okay for now, in 2 years you're saying, well, now we've got this player on these wages and we can't shift him, and we need to get a striker in, and all of that. And it's a weird one to me because from my perspective, you either signing young, high potential players, or you just go for it. If you're going for 27, you're not signing him. You're signing Gyökeres or Osimhen, someone who's actually at the top of their game at this point in time, that you think could carry you for the next 4 or 5 years. But
Yeah, look,
it's an odd one to me.
the teams United want to catch will sign Osman.
Yeah,
Okay, the teams that can't catch them, well, no disrespect to Matata, but
yeah,
that's not a guy you sign from another Premier League club.
yeah,
You because you're going to pay a price for that guy from another Premier League club that
yeah.
was 20, 30 million above what you can. There's guys that got all over European football,
Right.
and any African football, Asian football or whatever.
Mhm.
There's players like this everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And South American, what have you, good, decent 15 goal a season strikers. They're
Hmm.
everywhere. And I'm not saying you should snub your nose at it, but you shouldn't be paying what Palace will,
You don't want the
Palace,
premium on him.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a 20 million, but you need to have enough of those. They need an awesome, they need someone that coming
Yeah.
into who's obviously much better than what they have and who will make an immediate difference and who you're not betting on will realize potential. At some point,
Yeah.
there has to be, finished articles because the
Hmm.
potential needs to be winning games to grow confidence for it to develop, and that requires also experience in that team. So, to me, Osman's the obvious one. I
And
want
I
to talk.
think that would obviously be predicated on this thing of Champions League, right? I think it'd be really, really hard to get a player like that if United are, finishing 14th and outside of Europe. I think it's going to be really tough to do that this summer, which is part of the challenge. But it's also why it could be so transformative to do so financially. The attractiveness of the project, of the idea that it's sped up a little bit, that it's not gonna that we're got to stay, we're kind of there now, and maybe we can speed this up a bit. It is tough, but yeah, I mean, and if there was one position I said United should get somebody ready made, it would be at striker, because just
Oh,
having someone to make goals is like, it's big.
striker made it with a striker win yesterday.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
probably.
you need it with a striker beat Fulham.
Yeah, beats Sociedad, beats wins
Yeah,
yesterday. I think all of those
they
games
beat
are
Palace away,
yeah. I think
right?
that's the margin in those games, is that striker, yeah,
There's
very
just so
often.
many games I can look at. United with a striker, win this game, win this game, win this game.
And you get that
And
growth that comes from that, the
yeah.
confidence, the feeling, yeah.
And so anyway, the protests.
Yes.
Protests extremely vocal, extremely well organized. Of course, they were all over social media yesterday. United fans rightfully protesting over how the football club was being run. What's your take on the protest, James?
Yeah, I think it's always a good thing for people to focus on this and to keep making the message heard and making it understood. I thought it was interesting that somewhat randomly that Edward Glazer, who's not one of the ones you see very often, was in Manchester for the game yesterday alongside Jim Ratcliffe. Um, Wonder if he was aware of the. I mean, I'm sure Jim was, but I wonder if the other Glazer family member was aware of the protest happening. But it's a good thing, and I think that United fans sharing in that voice, in a well organized, demonstrated way that gets a lot of coverage, that gets a lot of eyes, a lot of looks at, and I think probably even had a contributing effect, as Ruben Amorim said, into the team and into the ground itself, that they may have actually used positively. And I think it's a good thing, and I think everybody, all of us, us, you and me here, with discussions we've had, disagreements over different aspects and all of that. One thing that we've all completely agreed on is at the end stage of all of this, the Glazers have to leave the club. And that is the thing that pretty much all fans are united on. It has to happen for the club to really get back to being what it's supposed to be at some point or another. And I'm happily in support of anything that pushes in that direction and moves it, that aligns people to that, because everybody should be on the same
Well,
page there.
I don't think it's fair on Amorim that this is the second protest he's had to face since he's
Yeah.
been here. I
Yep.
think this is a poor reflection on Ineos. This is
Mm-hmm.
not where they intended to be after a year.
Yep.
The football decisions that they've made, you'd have to be honest and say they've been very poor. They have not improved United. They may do in the long run. You can't issue a verdict. You can only issue, a
Temporary.
current
Right
state of
now,
the
this is what it
union.
looks like.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
current state of affairs.
Yep.
You can only issue, a current grade, but not a final verdict. But there were certain things that were promised the United fans that once again were never kept and were broken quite quickly by the new owners. One of them being about if there was an imperative and a necessity to raise things like ticket prices, that would be done through a discussion, through a fan forum. It wouldn't just be flung on you, and it was flung on you. And there's been so many issues with United fans don't like the way people inside the football club, ordinary people who are making a modest wage, the way they're being treated. United fans don't think that's commensurate with the culture and the values of what United have allegedly identified with for 146-year history, 147.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I think that the way that the club is being run has not been what I expected and what a lot of United fans expected would be done when Ineos took over. To me, you can't sit there and talk about financial imperatives to lay people off and list people off without mentioning the people that caused the problem. Like that to
Mm-hmm.
me is
Yeah.
sophistry beyond belief and really insulting. I understand there's this defamation clause or non-slander clause or whatever. I understand that, but that shouldn't prevent you from telling the truth,
Yeah.
right? And you can't turn around. This was always going to be a weird marriage to me, James. Are we going to sit here where Jim Ratcliffe has to sit behind the Glazers and tell you a black crow is white for 3 years because you don't want to upset the people next to you? Because I mean, this is ridiculous. This was never going to be able to work in the long term. It might work between Jim and the Glazers, but for the people on the other side of that, the fans, it doesn't make sense to me. The football club is in a financial mess simply because the only people that could have done anything about it are the
Yep.
Glazers.
Yep.
The only people that caused this are the Glazers. This is 100% a derivative of their greed and their
Mm-hmm.
avarice. That's it, right?
Yep.
Yes, there's mistakes that have been made in how United have invested. Yes, there's been mistakes made in how they've recruited. But all of this could have been mitigated a decade ago when
Yep.
United were told back then to put a football structure in place.
Yep.
And now they're claiming they have to do it out of necessity. But if they had done it then, when they should have done it, then this would look very different.
Yep.
But they're now in a position where they don't have a choice. And now the one thing that United can no longer afford, and that is to operate as a football club as a result of what's been done. I mean, this really is a despicable end stage of disgraceful
Yep.
greed that the Premier League should be mortified and ashamed that their regulations didn't have
Yeah.
enough teeth to prevent. How can your regulations permit people like Fax and Shinawatra banned football clubs, people like, despots, war criminals, and, all sorts of fraudsters, and allow
Mhm.
football clubs to be completely sodomized. Okay, but
Yep.
they don't allow someone to come and buy your club and pump it
Yeah.
full of money. Now I understand financial doping, or what they do encourage you selling their young player. Like this is madness.
I
This
know,
is
it is mad.
madness.
Yep.
And so to me, like it's I empathize completely with the fans because I'm a fan myself,
Yeah.
and I don't believe anyone who doesn't go to matches on a regular basis has any right to tell people who do how they should and shouldn't behave. Because at the end of the day, it affects them much more than it affects all of us, even though it affects all of us in different ways. But we have those fans to thank for everything that United still is. Because if it
Yep.
wasn't for them, there'd be a Super League. If it wasn't for them, United would look completely different. And they've always been on the right side of the argument. So I have nothing but respect for the United fans that rightfully voice their concerns. I feel for a lot of people in the club because they're really decent people and it's not their fault.
Yep.
They are, it's in a difficult position, but this is something that is on a broader issue. It's a bigger issue with regards to football teams, and the United
Yeah.
fans have really right to voice their concerns.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and we've talked about that a lot, the fact that it's ever been allowed to get to this point in a way that it can be done like this, and in a way that you can't even force someone to do anything about it beyond a decision that they're gonna have to make, that hopefully gets made in the future because, it is crazy that it's gone this long and there's still nothing that's ever been done or said or created that even would encourage change, from the ownership. They could have they could have implemented rules even after the fact, even in recent years, that could have made it more difficult for what's going on to go on. That could have required things like money taken out has to be replaced by money put in, and
Yes,
there's different ways that this could have been addressed by the lawmakers that they just never have cared to do enough because
agreed.
why would they? So it's rough, but the more pressure that gets put to continue to push for the end goal of the Glazers leaving and something being done about that is the best that can happen because I don't think anybody else is going to do anything about it.
I agree. We'll see what happens, mate. All right, James A, we'll leave it there. Thanks to all of you for downloading the pod as usual. We'll be back again next week. Hopefully, United are through in the Europa League next time. Who do they play next weekend? I've actually forgotten already.
I think it's Leicester is the final game before the international break.
Leicester away again.
They should win that. I mean,
I don't know.
but
We'll
like
see what
once again,
happens.
we'll see where we are a week from
All
now. If
right.
we have that same feeling every time.
Hopefully, by the time we record next week, United are still unbeaten. We will
Yeah.
see. Take
Yep.
it easy, mate.
Have a
All the
good one.
best,
See you
folks.
later.
Yeah, bye.